All right, let's jump right into this incredibly complex preliminary hearing regarding singer David Anthony Burke and the tragic death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. We're going to unpack the evidence using this explainer. Now, the state has presented a deeply disturbing narrative which has resulted in charges of first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a minor, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. And before we really get into the legal mechanics of all this, it is absolutely crucial to state unequivocally that any form of child exploitation is abhorrent and entirely unacceptable. Keeping that deeply serious context in mind, we're going to see today that while the prosecution presented what they call a small but illustrative fraction of their evidence, the defense is already zeroing in on some very significant holes. Here is a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll cover the legal framework, the state's compelling case, the missing 20 minutes, medical uncertainties, threats and self-defense, the missing chainsaw, and finally, the special circumstances. To really grasp why these evidentiary gaps matter, we first have to anchor ourselves in the legal threshold. A preliminary hearing only requires sufficient cause to hold someone over for trial. That is a much, much lower bar than proving someone guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in front of a jury. So while the judge ruled there was enough evidence to move this case forward, the prosecution didn't actually have to show their entire hand just yet. But the questions raised by the defense here, they give us a critical roadmap for what the actual trial is going to look like. Okay, let's start with the state's compelling case and how they are establishing this wall of evidence. Investigators have pulled together a massive volume of physical and digital proof. According to detective testimony, we're talking about alleged sexually explicit texts, which again is a deeply horrific element of this case, dating all the way back to November 2023. Beyond that, the state alleges that in the days following Celeste's reported death, items like a mop system, cadaver bags, and a blue inflatable pool were actually ordered to David's home using an alias. We also have a DNA expert testifying that bloodstains found in David's garage were a consistent match for Celeste, and that blue plastic fragments found with her remains matched that pool he allegedly ordered. And lastly, location data places his Tesla and her passport card out in Santa Barbara. But here is a detail that just absolutely stops you in your tracks. Detectives testified that 11 air fresheners were found in David's Tesla. Alongside that, testing found possible traces of blood that prosecutors suggest actually leaked, soaking right through the rubber mats down to the bricks underneath. It's a very grim picture, and it's exactly what DA Nathan Hochman is pointing to as a formidable circumstantial case. Which brings us to the missing 20 minutes, the murder timeline gap. When you map out the timeline, a striking gap emerges. There are 0 witnesses and no surveillance video of Celeste actually entering the home on Dillamini Place. While there are texts talking about an Uber picking her up, the driver couldn't definitively say she was dropped off at that specific house. So this leaves a crucial, roughly 20-minute unwitnessed window. Right after that window, at 10:31 p.m., David allegedly starts sending a dozen confused texts asking where she was to her silent phone. By 11:30 p.m., phone data allegedly shows the Tesla leaving the Hollywood Hills for Santa Barbara. So the million-dollar question here is this. Without direct eyewitness or video evidence, how are prosecutors going to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that first-degree murder occurred in that specific 20-minute time frame? The state claims David stood by while Celeste bled out. But the defense is pushing back, asking, where is the actual proof of what unfolded in those 20 minutes? And this lack of direct evidence bleeds right into the medical uncertainties and missing weapons. During cross-examination, the defense planted a really significant seed of doubt. They got the deputy medical examiner, Dr. Grant Ho, to admit he cannot definitively rule out that Celeste inflicted the wounds upon herself. The defense pressed him on whether knowledge of mental health issues or suicidal tendencies is helpful in an autopsy, which he agreed it potentially is. Because they don't have the murder weapon, the defense basically forced an admission that the exact circumstances of the 2 penetrating wounds, which happened within seconds of each other, are technically unknown. Furthermore, Dr. Ho testified he could confirm she had been dead for weeks, but because of the advanced state of decomposition, he couldn't pinpoint the exact date of death to April 23rd. Now, think about that. Could the defense use this to argue she was actually alive past the prosecution's alleged timeline? It definitely complicates the state's narrative. Let's look next at motive, threats, and self-defense. To challenge the premeditated attack narrative, the defense brought in texts from Celeste sent the day before the incident. According to them, she was demanding to see David, threatening anonymous accusations, threatening to leak information, and referencing jealousy over a woman in David's orbit. The text you're seeing is just one piece of what the defense is characterizing as deeply erratic behavior. So you have 2 totally competing narratives. Prosecutors argue these threats gave David a clear motive to kill her, to protect his career and silence her. But the defense uses those exact same texts to argue the opposite. They're suggesting she initiated the erratic encounter, begging to come over while David was just playing video games. This completely opens the door for a self-defense strategy or a heat of passion manslaughter argument, completely going against the state's premeditation theory. Now, beyond the cause of death, we have to ask, where is the third chainsaw? This is a wild detail. Detectives testified that 3 chainsaws were allegedly ordered to the home. But here is the catch. The 2 chainsaws they actually recovered in the garage tested completely clean of blood and DNA. A criminalist even testified that if they had been used for human dismemberment, there's no way they could have been cleaned that perfectly. Which leaves a 10-inch Makita brand chainsaw, allegedly ordered from Home Depot via Postmates, entirely unaccounted for. Private investigator Steve Fisher actually noted David's subsequent trips to a remote, poorly traveled road out in Santa Barbara, which really raises the question, was the true weapon, and arguably the biggest missing piece of the state's puzzle, disposed of out there? If the prosecution can't produce the actual tool used, that is a glaring hole on their physical evidence board.
Let's wrap up by looking at the special circumstances and next steps.
We are basically watching a high-stakes legal chess match unfold. For every special circumstance the prosecution alleges, the defense has a specific legal rebuttal ready to go. The state says he was lying in wait. The defense says, well, there was no surprise attack. She aggressively demanded the meeting. The state says he murdered a witness to silence her. The defense counters that her threats were about professional ruin, not about going to the police.
And when it comes to financial gain, DA Nathan Hochman points to David's massive $19 million record deal as the ultimate financial motive. The album was set to drop just days later. Now, the defense argues that under California law, anticipated future earnings aren't a concrete financial interest, but you're setting the stage for a fierce battle over intent, and it is pretty hard for a jury to ignore a figure as large as $19 million hanging in the balance. So as we look toward the formal arraignment on August 31st, we really have to ask, with a highly compelling but entirely circumstantial case featuring a missing weapon, an unwitnessed timeline, and ambiguous medical findings, who truly holds the leverage? DA Hochman says he is confident he can prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt at trial, but the defense has clearly drawn their battle lines. It's an absolutely fascinating legal maneuver on both sides, and it leaves us wondering, what moves are they going to make next? Thanks for learning with me today on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.